Okay, we have the Lord of the Flies, pages 175 through 202 reference summary. This one is going to be quick because this is mostly action, so there's not very many pictures or things that I can show. I do have a short little section I can show with a video. So, they journey to the castle. Remember, the castle is going to be an island, a separate island. It's got some sort of a land bridge going out. This, of course, being low tide and up in the Pacific Northwest with giant tides. You can see how it would be exposed, but at certain times this would be completely underwater. There's a bridge that goes out to the island, so to the island, and it's made out of rock, and it's attached to the mainland, and eventually it'll fall apart. And so this is supposed to represent that little bridge, right? So they journey to the castle, and the castle's key point is you have to cross the bridge to get to the castle. And Ralph confronts Jack, right? Now, when Ralph confronts Jack, it should become somewhat apparent that Ralph and Jack are well balanced. They're in the fight. They're like mirrors of each other. The way that they fight and the way that they can cause each other just about the same amount of damage and stop each other from hurting one another. They're well matched. And it should make one start to think, could they represent two sides of the same person? So this is a interesting graphic that has you thinking that maybe there is two sides of the same person, somebody getting pulled in two different directions kind of a thing. Does Jack and Ralph represent two sides of the same, of the way that most people are? So that's another way to look at this novel, if in case you hadn't thought of it in that direction. They fight with their spears, so we've got little art there. And Jack calls for his hunters to grab the twins and hold them. And Piggy manages to give a speech. He blows on the conch and gets everybody's attention. And during the speech, he asks three questions where he phrases them as what's worse, this or that, what's worse, this or that. Building things up or tearing things down. Things like that, those types of questions. But mainly, and they're not, the questions aren't that profound, but it's the fact that he asks three questions, and then immediately Roger rolls a huge rock down from the top of the castle. Now it hits Piggy, and it knocks him off the bridge, and he falls to the rocks below, and when we see him, he is killed. But it's inconclusive in the way it's written. If the large rock hits him, it says it hits him a glancing blow, and it's inconclusive whether or not the rock is what caused the damage, or it was the fall and then him hitting the rock that he lands on below that causes the damage that kills him. Some people would say it's immaterial, but some people would find that important when they're trying to decide, what level of blame and that sort of stuff, because each one of these accidental killings is becoming less and less accidental, and it's by small little differences. So it's, I think the author's playing with us with that for sure. Anyway, so he asks questions and he questions authority. It should be noticed that it's the last thing that happens is he questions Jack's authority. And it's the question. It's not so much it makes people think instead of telling them what to think. He asks people questions and they have to think. And that's the way to snap people away from Jack, is make people think instead of make people just blindly follow, right? So he makes people think, and he is killed for it immediately. This is the scene. It's done okay. Gives you some idea.
You do it every year, but it never gets old. Pack
so I don't want to go and belabor anything gory or whatever, but in all of the cases that they show this, when you look this up online, and all of the representations that you find, Piggy is hit in the head by the rock, and the rock is what kills him. And that shows, full on intent. But if you read the way that the author writes it, the author is still playing vague. He's rolled the rock. He's been throwing rocks. Roger's been throwing rocks at these combatants and stuff like that. And then when Piggy starts speaking, he gets a little bored, it seems like. And he wants more action. He wants back to the action, back to the violence. And he kind of just rolls it at him. And it's rolling at the bridge, but how does one know where exactly a thundering, rolling rock is going to hit? But it does hit Piggy because he's blind. He can't get out of its way. And in the way that it's written, it's hard to say. It was written as a glancing blow. Glancing, usually that word means it doesn't hit direct. So that does not sound like that's what kills him. It sounds like it hits him, knocks him off the bridge. He falls 25 feet down to the rock below, hits, and that is what has killed him. That's how it's portrayed, and that's why I wanted to show the video, because everybody portrays it in this other way where the rock is the direct cause of his death. And you've seen how subtle it is, where Simon, whose fault is that? And Raspberry Birthmark Kid, whose fault is that? And this author is playing with subtleties, whereas in film, they just want to give you the basic storyline. So it's important for me to spend some time and talk to you about how most people are just blaming it directly on Roger rolled a rock, it killed Piggy. But actually, Roger rolled a rock. The rock could have killed anybody. It could have even killed Jack. Jack was on that bridge when it goes rolling down. It hits Piggy. Yeah, it seems like, well, it hits Piggy because he's blind. He can't get out of the way. Maybe he could have gotten out of the way if he could see. So that would post blame on Jack for taking his glasses, which they are coming back to get. There's a lot of subtlety in the way that it happens. Just consider that. Anyway, so the conch is destroyed during this process, breaks into 1,000 fragments, and this, as Jack gives a little speech, that's what you get, something to that effect. They listen to me now. And Jack throws his spear at Ralph and hits him in the chest. Now, Ralph runs away. He's terrified because of what just suddenly happened. He's lost all of his troops. He lost Sam and Eric. Piggy is dead, and now he's all alone. He goes to the far side of the island, which is their original camp, and as he's in the forest, he's trying to convince himself that Piggy's death was accidental, that he should not expect the same fate. But he's in terrible fear that maybe there's doubt in his mind. He's like, but the reason I'm trying to convince myself is that I'm not sure. Maybe they will try to kill me. Maybe it was serious, and maybe they really tried to do that on purpose. So it's hard for him to, in his mind, come to grips with the fact that they might want him dead now. For what? I mean, what has he done, really? Ralph decides it is best to try to go back to recruit help rather than stay all alone. It shows how the human condition is. We seek out social contact of other people even after the other group has treated us so poorly. Even after we're afraid for our lives, we would still consider going back because that seems like safer than facing this island and existence alone and trying to survive alone, because that probably can't happen alone, catching pigs. And he doesn't have a knife. He does have a stick. That's about it. He finds the pig head on a stick and finds that it is eerily lifelike. And so he knocks the head off of it. He takes it apart and he uses the stick with two ends as a weapon. And at this point, the Lord of the Flies, or the pig head on a stick, has been eaten so completely by the flies that there's nothing left on it but a skull. And this is another thing that if you go looking up online that most people are missing when they're looking at movies and other stuff like that it's now been skeletonized down and it's nothing but bone. Instead, the only representations of Lord of the Flies pig head on a stick is always a full, fleshy, meaty pig head on a stick, and it's it's that imagery of the flies consume the meat. They internalize it. It becomes part of them. I think that the flies, who is the lord of the flies? We can look at it a couple of ways. You can look at it as like fear, or you can look at it as like Lord of the Flies, like biblical kind of the devil who thrills in all of the dark emotions, sadness, depression, despair, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. You can look at it so many different ways. Who is the true Lord of the Flies? But if you look at it as representational, perhaps it is Jack. And Jack is like the Lord of the Flies, and the flies are all of the kids who are like internalizing. They're taking his way. They're eating his they're consuming and internalizing his ideas, and they're taking to, okay, we're going to run the island more like Jack. We're going to be more like Jack, and he's becoming part of them, so to speak. They're like infected. They take in the poison, and then it becomes part of them, and it poisons them. That kind of a thing. The flies eat all of the meat off of the skull. The flies have consumed this thing that Jack has created, and now it's part of them. So there's some imagery going on in there. Anyway, so he finds the pig head on a stick, and I can't find any with skulls. Nobody ever wants to do the skull at the second part. Everybody just wants to do a pig head on a stick. This is a brilliant illustration of it, but it's not a skull, and none of them are. Although it does show that now it's getting older. At least we got some of that going on. He finds it eerily lifelike, and he takes it apart and uses the stick with two ends as a weapon. He's going to use that as a tool. He approaches the castle. He finds Sam and Eric on guard duty in the back, and he can get close, and he can be quiet, and he can stay outside. He'd have to really try to climb and scale to get that last few vertical feet all the way up to them, and maybe they could pull him up, but it's kind of like they're up high, he's down low. So he finds them on guard duty, and after much convincing, they are absolutely terrified of being caught. They agreed to mislead Jack and his hunters. So Ralph burrows into the thicket because he tells them, this is where I'm going to be. Don't let them go near that. And in the morning, the calls of the hunters are heard leaving, and they're called ululations. And ululations is a howl or wail, usually as an expression of strong emotion, sometimes as grief, but when the hunters are ululating, they're making a howl. And when you think of it like a howl or a wail, you go, oh my gosh, it's more almost like wolves, or almost like a pack of animals that are hunting together. People, when you originally hear the word, you might think of a whistle, and it could be, they could choose to use a whistle, but by definition, it's more of like a howl. Ralph waits, and then finally hears whispers. He thinks that everybody must have gone, and he's overweighted, but no, he didn't. And they're very smart to have waited him out. But he doesn't break cover. And then he hears whispers, and Jack forces Sam and Eric, you can hear it in the dialogue, to confirm that this is where Ralph said that he would be. One of Jack's enforcers actually hurts one of the twins, causes them some pain so that they actually feel compelled to confess. They try to find a way inside the thicket, and one of them gets a little too close, and Ralph doesn't like it, so he spears him real good. And he yelps, and he's in pain, and he's hurt, and Jack says, oh, he is in there. I told you he was dangerous. And, he's even turning it into like this is almost like a fun and a game for him. So the boys start rolling boulders at the thicket to try to dislodge or kill Ralph. And it should be remembered that that's the way that they killed Piggy. So maybe Piggy was an accident, but this isn't one. They've learned from that accident. You see what I mean? And that kind of makes us wonder how much of that accident was an accident. If they did it, they learned from it, and now they're doing it again. How much of it's really can be called an accident? Anyway.
This rock. What's the whole lot's going to go? Oh, is it moving out? It's moving. It is moving. It's going to go.
Hang up. It's going.
It's going.
Film.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh! Yes.
Okay, so obviously, if you go and you look up people rolling rocks, you get an awful lot of people like to roll rocks. This is not just Roger. An awful lot of people have got a craving to roll a boulder down a hill. They just love the idea of the amount of amount of destruction and everything that it can cause, and they just want to see it. So something to consider. It's not very hard to find video of people rolling boulders all over the place. People are drawn to the technique. Not necessarily to kill, but these boys, they're taking it to the next level. They fail to get him with the rolling rocks through the... You can only roll so many. There's only so many loose ones, and there's only so many that are going to angle that are going to even get close to that thicket. So they fail, but next they light a fire to the thicket to burn him out, a la the way that Raspberry Eye Birthmark Kid was killed. Which makes us again think, how much of that Raspberry Birthmark Kid being killed was accident? If they're going to use the same accidental method to now kill somebody again, you certainly can't say this is an accident. The fire forces Ralph out, but confuses the vision of everyone. Ralph gets out, but pursued immediately by the hunters. He's chased. And he wonders, as he's chased, what does a stick sharpened at both ends mean? And it's with a dread and a fear. There is a high-action running sequence of heart-pounding chase until Ralph finds Simon's hideout, and he goes and hides in it. When he's hiding in it, there's a small chance that... Well, there's a chance that he won't get found, but they've already realized that he likes to find thick cover. So they found this thing, and he's found. They keep looking further and further in until he's found, and he breaks from the cover of vines in a description that is very much like that of a wild boar charging its pursuers. And there's a ton of stuff, information on that, if you will care to look it up. Surviving a wild boar attack. There's the tusks, which are the males use as weapons unless they are broken off. They can run up to 25 miles per hour, and they're they're tough. There's a whole lot of information all on it. When do they attack people? When they feel cornered or threatened to defend themselves, protect piglets. They're more frequent. There's a whole lot of information on it, but essentially, when a wild boar, if you look at them, the way all the hair on them, and they got super, super, super thick skin, pig skin leather, and they got all the hair on them from the nose to the tip of the tail is pointed towards their tail, from nose to tail. So this is a biological fact. When things if the pig is running right at something, it's like a bowling ball running at bowling pins, man. It's got a low center of gravity. It's able to knock you out of the way and make you lose your footing. And then as it keeps going right on by, you might try to grab it or bite it, but every hair on it is facing from nose to tail, and it's like slips right on through. It's like fish scales. They all point in one direction. It only lets a fish go in one direction. It only lets the pig going in one direction. Once it's moving, it's hard to stop it. They claim that if like a bear is able to sidestep a pig, because we do have bear-pig interaction in California, if a bear can sidestep a pig, it might be able to grab a hold of it and hold on to it, but if a pig runs directly at a bear and hits it and goes bowling ball technique, it knocks the bear out of the way and keeps right on going. Even a bear can't stop it, and a lot of the time, mountain lions can't stop them. They're just too much go in the full-size adults with all of the hair pointing from the nose to the back and such thick skin. And it's really hard for a mountain lion with a neck like that to find a way to get to suffocate it, because it's huge. It's bigger than the cat's mouth can fit around, and the spine's too far down in to bite. So these things are absolutely difficult for even up to, except for maybe a bear in California. Of course, the piglets can get eaten. So when they describe it, it's a very specific way of him charging right at, instead of trying to avoid and run from, charging right at the guy to knock him over, so as to be able to keep running and have more of a chance to escape. That's exactly the way that the pigs act, and that's the way they describe Ralph knocking over the guy who is checking out his last hiding spot stand. At some point, Ralph realizes what a stick sharpened at both ends means for him, and it is with an overwhelming sense of dread. He stays closer to the smoke and the fire to make it harder on the hunters, thinking that fire is going to hurt all of us. And when he all seems lost, he breaks out of the brush to see a naval officer and rifleman. This book was written in the 1950s. This is about approximately 1950s battle dress uniform for the Navy, and you can see that you've got officers here. You've got even some, these are like flight command because they've got the flight jackets, but they aren't necessarily pilots. This guy is probably more like, head of the whole department kind of a thing. And this guy is probably more like an enlisted, someone who's younger, but he's still part of the crew. That's why he's in the picture, and you can see the difference between the uniforms. It would be kind of like these uniforms. It's not like we're expecting, Navy all pretty dress uniforms. This is Navy. I'm in battle. These are our battle fatigue uniforms, and this is the way that they used to look back then. And as I said, he would probably have a pistol at his side. These guys aren't, because they're on ship. Who wants to deal with that right now when they're on ship? But when they have to run security in hostile areas, he would have a pistol on side, and this guy would have a rifle. So that's them. He breaks cover and finds these two full-grown men looking him over. And he starts just crying and freaking out about all that he's experienced. And all the other boys come in behind him and see same thing. There's the officer, and next to him, his enlisted, and behind them in the distance, this ends the stories, the image of the ship that they have parked, and they've got closer. They're going to have a landing craft, and then in the foreground, and then we're going to have our two rescuers, the officer and his helper, his security his security guard. So here we are. This is how the thing ends. You know that they're going to get on the boat. They're all going to take off. Considering that the officer does ask, hey, what happened to all the kids on the island? Do you guys know how many there are? Do you know their names? And they said no. And he's like, I expected better from you guys. And they started breaking down. He's going to have to search the island. He's going to have to make sure he gets everybody. That means that the little ones will probably be taken care of. But when he goes and searches this island, and he's heard that, because, when he asks, Ralph, what were you doing? Playing war? Yeah, we were. Hope there weren't too many casualties. Only a couple. And he's like, he realizes that the kid, the way he says it, is telling the truth. And he even whistles. He's like, don't want to be too loud, but all right. So he can't believe it, that he's like, no way. But, he's going to go looking all over this island. What's he going to find? About the only thing he's going to find is two different stories depending on who you talk to. He's not going to end up finding any evidence because, again, all of the evidence disappears on this island. So he's not going to find anything. And that means Jack is going to go unpunished, and the story moves on, and nobody's going to know the full story except us, because we've seen it from multiple perspectives of the same story through our excellent narration done by our incredible author. And that wraps up this piece. That ends out the Lord of the Flies for our reference summary. Make sure to check out the guided tour.